Everyone. So, you ready for a couple fun facts? Are you sure? Okay, so since 'tis the season for Easter bunnies, guess what percent bite the ears off of chocolate bunnies first? Close. 76% bite the ears off of chocolate bunnies first. And then guess where they go? The feet. And then the tail. Is that hilarious? All right. Here's another thing. A single elephant tooth can weigh 9 pounds. That would be crazy. Oh my gosh. Okay, one man in Japan holds the record for the most push-ups, 10,507. Abs of steel. I'm telling you, abs of steel or dead or something. I'm hoping he's still alive after that one. Okay, so here's kind of a funny one. You guys know Candy Crush? That game? Who plays it? All right. There's been over 1 trillion levels of Candy Crush played to today. That's how much people play Candy Crush. I've seen people playing it. Like people play it all day, like when I'm on the plane, they're playing Candy Crush the whole time. Okay, here's something kind of gross. A tarantula can survive more than 2 years without food. Ew, who cares about them? No, just kidding. They are good for our environment, so whatever. All right, so we're on chapter 6, everybody. Did y'all read? Ask your neighbor if they read. If they didn't read, you can pinch them, but not hard. Say, you're supposed to read. All right, so when we know that in chapter 5, that was when God instituted with Moses. He was the one that God chose. Of course, he chose Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage that they had been in for about 430 years. And then he had all of the 10 commandments that are still in effect today. Yes, they are. They're still in effect today. That the first, I believe, 4 of them, the first 4 commandments were between us and God, and the last, how many would that make? 6, or between, our lives, and how we're supposed to be with each other and how we're supposed to be on the earth. Because you have to remember that they were in bondage for that long. They didn't know how to rule themselves. So they had no regulations or rules outside of Egyptian bondage. So when they got out of that, they were all crazy. I mean, they didn't know how to live. They were wanting to do everything. That's why when you start reading in these chapters 6, 7, 6 touches a little bit on some sexual immorality things and on keeping your body as God's temple, because there were things that they just had no rule over. And now this is when God started to institute things in their life so that they had some rule. How many know we need some of those things? We need some parameters in our life. Otherwise, we're all going to go crazy, right? So those were good things. But remember, some of the things that we have to remember that God is doing is, God deals always first with the heart of a person. It's not about putting a bunch of rules and regulations over our life, but God always expresses his love to us and always gives us so many opportunities and chances to live a great life. Would you agree with me? Because God is a God of love. Like they were just singing, that's such an amazing song. God is a good God. He's perfect in every way. All of his what do I want to say? His statutes and all of the, I don't like to call them laws, but all of the things that he sets up in life for us to follow, his word, all the things that are in his word. There's so many things that, everything is so great for our life. We have to fight humanity a little bit, because what does humanity want to do? Humanity loves to fight everything, right? Humanity is a little bit stubborn. And how many, it's kind of hard if you haven't read this, but one of the things that were really redundant in this chapter 6 is, and they started it in chapter 5, they are major whiners. Tell your neighbor, please don't be like that. Oh, tell them please, and I mean it. Yeah, because listen, the destination in our life, and they're talking about their destination was what? Canaan, which was the promised land, which is, nowadays Palestine. So what they were trying to get to was a place in their life, the promised land, where everything was great. But how many of you know the road to getting there is another story? the life walk that we walk out and that we have every day, it's another story altogether. But what do we do and act, and what do we say in our journey? That's what we're kind of looking at today. And we're kind of looking at in their wandering seasons, because our life, when you kind of look at it like this, we wander in a lot of things in our life. Pretty much when we got saved to when Jesus comes again, we've got some direction, but some things we're just feeling like we're wandering. But we have to always keep focused and locked into Jesus, because then we're going to be on the right paths. Now, we're not going to know every single thing, because the Bible says we only know in part. But as long as we live our lives by faith and trusting in God, we're going to go down the right paths. Amen? Sometimes they're hard paths. Did you hear me say that? Did I say everything was going to be easy? Right. Not everything's going to be easy. So I just want to recap a couple minutes on some things, and then I'm going to go back and we'll kind of get into it a little bit. Sorry, I have 15 pages of notes that I've been writing like crazy on. I've been doing this for like a couple weeks. So let's put up the upper story, and I want you guys, because remember the upper and lower story, understand what that means? So the upper story is always God trying to redeem his people back to him, his love relationship with him. So in this part of this story, God's always faithful, and he's a promise keeper. I want you to tell your neighbor that, because everybody has to get it. Yep, God is always faithful. Now say it louder, because I'm so not convinced by that. Y'all quiet. I'm like, really? He is? You didn't convince me. But I already know that, but I'm just saying. And here's the lower story. The lower story is our life. The lower story is as we're reading this, the lower stories just tell all about people's walks and what happened in their life. And that's just like us. So this is to be content. Ooh, tell your neighbor that. Because we got to get that bugger out of the way at the beginning of this thing, or everyone's going to be mad the whole time I'm talking. Okay? So be content and trust God. And listen, don't wander from him, because if we wander from him, we will wander. Our whole life will be just like circles and going down the wrong path and not knowing where we're going. That's what will happen in our life. So here we're talking about that they're at the border of the promised land, okay? And there's just so many things. Well, I'm going to actually move past this. Well, no, I want to give you some of this. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit because it's just kind of my intro. But so the children of Israel are all at the border of Canaan, at the promised land, okay? And they're not going to enter, and we'll kind of lay that out there, into it yet. They actually won't enter until chapter 7, okay? So the next chapter they're going to enter. But this one, they're just on the outskirts, and they're having to just kind of mill around and just kind of like, be with Moses and all the things that are happening, and they're at this, border of the promised land. So what Moses does is he sends in how many spies? He sends in 12 spies. So that's what he wants to. He wants to check this out. And I'm just kind of doing this quickly, but like I said, we'll come back. So to see what the land is about. So they end up wandering, and we'll discuss why. But what happens is in this, why they had to wander for 40 years is because God tests their hearts, and some of them didn't make it. Some of them didn't listen to God. They didn't obey God, so they didn't make it. And it's really the same for us today. God doesn't want that. He doesn't want us to be out, but he wants us to listen and obey what he has to say, because what he has to say is always right. And how many of you know? In your lower story, in your walkings, when you haven't done that, our life is crazy. So that's just kind of, why God kept so many instances of them complaining. They complain about no meat to eat. They complain about no water to eat. Where has God brought us out of Egypt? They're longing for bondage, which is crazy. And they're longing for what they used to have. And so God's showing us, like, are you longing to be back in where you used to be? That's why he kept all of these in here, so we could relate our lower stories to their lower stories. Because you know what? It's true, a lot of us have some of those, right? We can understand that. So I want you to write this in your phone, or I want you to write this down because this is really important. When we wander, this is what happens. When we wander, this is where our deep attitudes and actions of a self-centered life are revealed. Wow. So when we wander, it's our deep attitudes and actions of our self-centered heart are revealed. So how many of you know we live out of the mouth what speaks? Out of the mouth what is speaking? Your heart. So this is revealing how much wander we have inside of our heart by what we're living out, by what we're speaking, by what we're, our actions towards things. So we wander until we figure out to listen to God and his guidance. Wilderness wanderings remind us that faith equals life, write this down, and unbelief equals death. Okay? Now, I'm speaking about spiritual death, things that don't work right in our life, things that don't come to completion in our life. So faith honors God, and God honors the faithful because he can trust us, because he knows what's in our heart, okay? So we're going to go back and we're going to talk about this. So, Moses, how many of you know that it wasn't easy to deal with 2 million people, 2 million plus people when everybody's multiplying and they're walking and all this is happening? Do you know how long this journey was supposed to be? That took 40 years. It was supposed to be 11 days. That's an 11-day journey from Mount Horeb to Canaan. 11 days. And it took 40 years. It didn't take 40 years because they were slow walkers. It took 40 years because of this. And it took 40 years because of this. And that's a sad thing. That is a sad thing. Talk about a waste of time and energy. Talk about my feet hurt. Do you know that and them complaining? Remember what happened before the last couple chapters? Remember when God parted the Red Sea? He's done that for any of us lately? Have we seen a Red Sea parted? I think that's one of the most amazing things. Why I think that the Israelites are so on blast is because God just was not happy with them at all. Because God spoke to Abraham and he said, I will bless you and your descendants. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and everybody from till now and till forever, till Jesus comes. We are all descendants. So that's God's word. That's God's promise, the upper story. He's a promise keeper. So what God says is real and it's life, and we can trust and bank our whole life on that. But see, what this was showing the Israelites is every single time that it would get hard or something would not be there for them, they would start complaining and they would not remember the word of God. Like God would lead them out after 430 years and leave them to die in some dusty desert. They didn't know their God. So that's why God needs us to see that, listen, when you're starting to doubt, let's not, pull back the things of our life, and let's not slow our life down by our doubt and unbelief. And that's what was happening here to them. So see, God stands by his people even when they don't stand by him. And many times he was like, Moses, these stiff-necked people, that means they're not budging, they're not moving, they're not doing anything. What is wrong with them? Like God didn't know. So many times, as you read, Moses had to stand in and say, God, you can't kill them. You said you wouldn't. I know they deserve it, but God. He's like, why are they talking against me? Why are they doing this against me? They're not trusting me. God was not happy. So this is like this whole thing, what's going on. Now, I love that. They went. So the 12 spies that went represented one from each tribe. Okay, so remember Jacob, who was later named Israel, he had 12 sons. And so what Moses did is he said, I need one from each tribe to go into the Canaan, and I need them to look at this land, okay? So right before that, though, people, this is when they start complaining. Between the last chapter and this chapter, there's 13 times that these buggers whine and complain to God. You know what 13 represents in the Bible? That's a number of rebellion. So they were rebelling and rebelling and rebelling against God after he keeps showing them all this stuff. And God just keeps getting so irritated with them. So it's amazing that no matter how much God does and sends to our life and blesses our life, we still find room to complain. And we still find room to discount what he's already done. Because really, in essence, this is just pride and us standing up and saying, God, we don't think that you can provide for us the way that we should be provided for. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be in front of him and say that to his face. But guess what? He hears it first. And that's where he was dealing with all this. So see, we need to be content with what we have, because until that day comes, God will never bless us with more. Tell your neighbor, oh, scary. Yeah, we can't long, this is really big too. We can't long for the things of old because we will never step into the new. Some of us have been addicted in the past. Is that what we want? We want that back on us just because we didn't have to hold a job and it was easier? I don't think that's kind of in essence what these guys were saying. I mean, when was slavery something that was good? They were whipped, they were beat, they got to a point where they had to collect their own straw to make the bricks out of. You know how hard task labor stuff that was? And did you see all of, if you watch anything of Egypt, or you see their buildings, do you see the massive, amazing buildings that they have, structures that they have, and they did it all on their backs. And all their hard work and all them, making all those bricks, all that kind of stuff. And they were longing for that again. It's crazy. It's crazy. So then they start complaining. Oh, Moses, we want to have meat. Why, we used to have meat back in Egypt and Egyptian bondage. And God's like, what did he send? He's like, oh, okay. So the manna that he provided, which he provided manna every day, and they would gather it, make it into cakes or bread or whatever they would do. And, whenever they needed water, he would tell Moses to do certain things, to make sure that they had water and all their livestock had water. So it was just a matter of asking him, and they would have everything that they needed, okay? And so, that wasn't good enough for him. Plus, not to mention, they had a pillar by day, always guided by the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day, and which not only was a guide, but it was also shade for them and all that, and all these things he just protected over these millions of people, and their clothes never wore out, and their shoes never wore out. After 40 years, I can't even keep shoes for a couple months. 40 years. Now, some of us have 40-year-old sweatshirts, I know. My brother does. He wears the same Minnesota sweatshirt, and I'm like, brother, could you please put that in the rag bin? He's like, no, I love this. I'm keeping it forever. I'm like, oh. So he has the spirit of never wearing out the sweatshirt on him. So God sent quail, but God was not happy because they whined and complained about quail. And he said, all right, Moses, I'm going to send him quail, but you know what I'm going to do for them whining? I'm going to send it till they get so sick of eating quail, it's going to come up out of their nostrils. He goes, fine, you feed them this for 30 days. Oh. Now, this is not to make God sound mean. This is to make God sound that he's a just God, and you don't backtalk him. And you don't do this. You don't discount who he is. Because he's always there to provide. He's always there to be good. And he's like, Moses, they will not stop. All this kind of stuff. So crazy, right? So those people that longed for meat, guess what? They all got struck with the plague too, and they all died off. I tell your neighbor, I'm going to start being content. Now, thank God, he doesn't do anything like this today. But our life will definitely suffer some slow stuff in it, because God hears our hearts still. And he does not like, things that are not respectful towards him, honoring towards him. He doesn't like it. So then, those are all the people, all the Israelites. But then family steps in. And when family starts coming against you, that's the worst. And I got both my families in ministry with me. And thank God, they are great. They just do their thing. You know what I mean? But Miriam and Aaron, they're his brother and sister, they start talking. And they start listening to the people about all the stuff that they want and all the stuff that they're discontented with. And they start not trusting. And they're the leaders with Moses. And they start, saying, you know what? I think we need to stone them. Are you up out of your mind? Number one, you're going against who God said is your leader. You don't ever talk about them. Then are you up out of your mind? What are you talking about? So then, and also, what was known about Moses, which I love? He was known as the most humble man on the earth. That's who God picks. And that's who God sees. So, but oh, Lord Jesus, the things that you call those people to do, these nice, humble people in their own nice, humble life, and you call them to be over these crazies, right? So that's what he did. So he's all this stuff. So God, he says, Moses, I want you and Miriam and Aaron, I want you to come here. So he comes down in the cloud and he starts talking to them. And he says, I can't remember what page it's on, but you guys can read it. It's amazing what he says. I think it's on page... Okay, so this is what he says to them. He says, Moses, Aaron, Miriam, I need to have a little chat with you. And see, he's been hearing all this. And so they want to stone all of the leaders. You know how stoning was done in those days? They put them in a pit and they'd roll huge boulders on them until they died. That's pretty barbaric. So this is what they wanted for their leaders that led them out of Israel. They're crazy. Crazy. So it says, when there is a prophet among you, this is God saying this to Moses and Miriam and Aaron. He says, when there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. Is this on your page 74? Okay, see, I'm in the kids' Bible. Is it saying that though? Or is it saying something different? Let me see what yours says really quick so I'm not reading kidlit versions. You're so sweet. My sweet thing. I'll use this one. It's pretty close. It says, when there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Then were you not afraid to speak against your servant Moses? Then this is God saying, what are you doing? This is my man. What do you think you're doing talking about my man who I speak to? What are you doing talking about him? And he's not happy. So guess what? Miriam is struck with leprosy for doing that. Sorry, I'm spitting everywhere. I'm excited. Woohoo! So, anyway, so she is. And Moses is like, God. Aaron says, please, Moses, please talk to God. Please don't let him leave her in this state. So he goes, fine. Take her out, let her be out in the city for 7 days, and she can come back in and she'll be all healed. He was mad. Well, wouldn't you be if your top leader wanted to stone you and kill you? I mean, what a creep. She's a creeper, that's for sure. So God was not happy with all this. So let's go to the 12. So they were all sent in to explore Canaan, this promised land, right? So the people went, all 12 of them went in. They were there for 40 days. Okay, looking around, spying around, looking at what's going on. They said the grapes were so big in the clusters that they had to be carried on poles between two people. They were that big. I mean, everything was in abundance in that land. It was definitely an incredible place. And this is where God said, this is where I'm giving this to you. And so, and the people, so they start seeing the people, and they're like big people. They're like massive people, right? And so they all come back to the report, and they said, oh yeah, everything is great there. Everything is plentiful. Everything is awesome. All that kind of stuff. But this is what happened. Then, okay, let me see. Okay, Royce, let me see if it's on the same page as you. Oh, okay. I think it's on. Okay, so here it says, so at the end of the 40 days, they returned from, I'm on page 75, I'm sorry. It's kind of close to what I just read. You can find it. Returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron, the whole Israelite community. They're all there. They reported to them what they saw, the fruit in the land. They said this, it does flow with milk and honey. Here it is, the fruit. Listen to what they said. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified, very large. That was the 10 spies' reports. 10 of them said that. So what they started to do is they started to let fear be their guide. And it cost them everything. Everything. If you read it, you understand what I'm talking about. It cost them everything. Okay? So their negativity, everything that they started to say, it started to spread throughout all the people. Well, the people were crazy anyway, and all, misery loves company. And that's exactly what the report that they brought. But then look at this. Then it says, then Caleb, these were the last two, Caleb and Joshua. It says, Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land. We can certainly do it. So then they start saying again, the 10, they're stronger than us. We can't do it. They're stronger than us. They're of great size. All this kind of stuff. We seem like grasshoppers in their eyes. All this kind of stuff they were saying. So I'm kind of, going forward. The Israelites, they're grumbling. They're saying all this. All this kind of stuff is going on. Where's this part? Okay, so listen to this. What Caleb says. He says that, and they were just bugged. And they were saddened by what these spies were saying. Because they're like, what is the deal? So this is what they said. They go, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. The protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Wow. So see what's going on here. Joshua and Caleb were the only two who believed the word of the Lord. What did God say to Abraham? This is still a continuation. Whatever God says, God's going to do. I don't care if a year goes by, 3 years goes by, 10 years goes by, 25 years goes by, 50 years goes by. God is still a God of his word. God, tell your neighbor, is a good God. Tell him God is not punitive. That is caused by us. Tell him. Yeah. It's not God who's doing it. It's us and our choices. So listen. So this is the key. They trusted God and knew who they were in God. Do you see these faith statements that they just made? They're amazing. They've got the same choices like everybody else. They walked through the plagues just like everybody else. They walked through everything. They're hoofing it just like everybody else. Why are they set apart and different? Why are you set apart and different? Same deal. Because you choose to believe God. and you don't choose to believe the naysayers, and you don't choose to believe the world, and you don't choose to believe what maybe is the common thing or the popular thing or everything else. Jesus said, narrow is the gate. It's not this big wide open thing. Why did he say that? Because not everybody believes, because everybody wants to be with the status quo. And everybody wants to do what everybody else is doing, but that doesn't mean it's right. So this is what Jesus says in Matthew 7. The gate is not wide open. It's very narrow. So you choose what you're going to do. So see, people have a choice here to have faith or to doubt like us every single day. And this is what they're coming up against. And it's a sad thing because they keep choosing the wrong thing. They're complaining against their leaders. All this stuff is going on. So these 2 were full of faith, and the 10 were spreading so much negativity that all this is going on. And what God did is he wasn't happy with those 10 spies and everyone that believed. So you know what he did? He said, how many days have you been spying out the land? 40 days. He said, okay, for every year of every day that you spied out the land, so that's 40 years, you will wander. And that's where they got the 40-year wandering. Because you didn't trust what I said. Because you didn't believe and remember what I had said to you. And when I say to go do something, I mean to go do something. And I've already given you the land. There's battles that they didn't even have to take up a spear for at times. God just would go, and the presence of God would come, and then the angel of the Lord would be in front of them, and people would be so scared that they would just retreat. That's how God would do battles sometimes. But it's like you still got to walk and you still got to go. And they weren't doing this. And so they were murmuring and whining and complaining. I don't have my Bible. I just have my story Bible. Can someone turn to Hebrews 11:6 for me? Or Doug, do you have that? Or can you find that or no? Because this is why. So all of this spread throughout the land, okay? And this is what God said. He said, this is what I'll do. He says, all of you 20 and older, you're going to wander. And you're going to wander for 40 years, and you're not going to make it into the promised land. But your kids are going to serve you for 40 years, and they're going to work this ground and toil, and they're going to be saved. They're going to be able to go into the promised land. But you, 20 and older, you're not. So when you all die off, that's what's going to happen, and they're going to be able to go into the land. Okay, so Hebrews 11:6 says, I'll be like Pastor Chris. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I actually have good sight. Okay, so it says, so why? I'll give this back next year. So why is God saying this? Why is this going on? Because look, Hebrews, we find this out in the New Testament. Hebrews 11:6 says, and nothing has changed. God was the same from and what he believed and what he taught in the Old Testament to the New. Except, of course, we have Jesus, which is our, saving grace, of course. But without faith, it is what? Say it. To what? Okay. Hello, get back here. So, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who what? Yes, that's our answer. That's our answer for all time. Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it's impossible. They had faith. The same thing that they're walking in then was faith. Believing in God. Except they got to see a lot of miracles firsthand. We hear about them. But this is what's going on. And so God was bugged. And he's like, what more can I do? What more can I show you? What more can I say? So, it's like I tell my daughter this. I say, if you do something that's not right, do you think I should reward that? Well, she says yes. No, just kidding. She thinks yes, but that's not the case. So I say, listen, and God's the same way. I mean, God disciplines his children because he loves us, not because he hates us. And so this is what happens, is when I discipline my daughter, she gets on the right parameter and on the right road, and it straightens up her life. Same with God. He's got to say, hey, this is a deal over here. I need you to fix this. I need you to bring this over here a little bit, and I need you to not do that. Because if you don't change that, this is what you're going to get. See, God always gives us chances, right? And he always lays it out there. So this is it here, that we have to trust and have faith, because without it, it's impossible to please God, because that's how God moves. That's how we live. Our life is a life of faith. This is what we do. So God, what he can't work with, and this is what we're seeing through all of this, is he can't work with stubborn unbelief. You ever had someone you worked with or a boss or something who's so stubborn it just drives you nuts? Or you're like this? We're like, nobody can talk to them. So this is where stiff-necked comes in. Like, no, I'm not budging. Nope, I'm not moving this way or that way. I'm just doing what I want to do. We can't talk to that person. It's stubborn unbelief. What can God do with a person that's like that? Answer. He can't. He can't. So, of course, we know 1,500 years later when Jesus comes, which is amazing. See, Jesus died because God is a just God, and he wants us to have a way of being saved and changing all this in our life. He doesn't want to judge us. He wants to judge sin, not us. So he sends Jesus to do what he did for our lives. So Jesus forever condemned sin. And that's what he did. So God is just. So you can't tell your neighbor, nobody can say God's not just. He's very just and he's very fair. So this is all that was going on. So we all get that? I'm not trying to go too fast or anything. Y'all still with me? All right. So 40 years later, and what happened after 40 years? Remember, what was going on in the 40 years? All those people were what? Dying off, okay? All those complainers were dying off. All those ones that didn't trust were dying off. Sadly, the children were picking up their traits. They had a chance, and they knew, some of them that weren't little, they knew what was going on with their relatives. And what happened is they started picking up those same complaining traits. You know, unbelief and things that happen in our life, they're gradual slides. You know, like marriages don't just automatically wake up one day and say, I'm done. Well, it shouldn't be like that. But it's just, listen to this. It's consistently choosing no. Okay, it's not consistently choosing yes and consistently choosing, I'm going to work this out. Consistently choosing, I'm going to grace this one. Consistently choosing, I maybe was wrong in this one. That one we never say. But this is consistently choosing no. Consistently choosing not to believe. That's where all this was happening. So they had the miracles. Then God blessed them, and all this stuff was happening. And God was, delivering them. Like all these different tribes. God was just He gave the Canaanites over to Israel. He gave the Amorites over to Israel. Just gave them over. Like you are going to take these people. He just gave them to them. And so they just still chose to not believe. So what happens then is Moses, now they start complaining about water again. They did this before. I think in chapter 4, chapter 5, I can't remember. But so they're starting to complain. So they complain about water again. And this is a big thing here because this affects Moses' life. So what happens is God told him to what? To speak to the rock. He told Moses to do that. But what did they do? They struck the rock twice. And God's like, lost in translation somewhere. So God saw that, and I when I was reading this again, but I was just kind of, thinking about this. I'm like, Moses. I'm like, you know better. Nobody knows better than him. I'm like, you know better. You've seen what just died off after 40 years. I'm like, really? So that was kind of shocking to me. I was just like, but nobody's perfect, right? Nobody is. Nobody ever has been except for Jesus. So that's what he did. So he struck it twice. And God saw it as disobedience and a lack of trust. So Moses and Aaron were not allowed to go into the promised land. Sad. But that's what happens when you don't obey. God's like, listen, and he had no excuse because he had done miracles to put his staff out and to get water before. Look at all the things that God had him do to try to get Pharaoh to turn. He was like, Moses, do this, do that, turning the water into blood, the Nile into blood. Moses was like, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? He saw all of this. He saw the power of God. He knew what God could do. So it wasn't like he didn't. So then with Aaron, because he was with him in it, God said, Aaron, you're going to die soon. So you're going to be gathered up with your people. You're not going to see the promised land either. So his son Eleazar was now appointed to be the next priest for Aaron. He stood in the place of Aaron when Aaron died off. So Eleazar was now the successor of him. And then there were, just all these complaints, all these crazy things, as you read on, where what God was dealing with and, what he was trying to do with them. They still didn't learn. They still didn't stop. They got to the place where they kept complaining over things. Remember the part of the story where then God sent venomous snakes to bite the ones that were complaining? I'm telling you, God was wild, wasn't he? But they're not learning their lesson. So, of course, Moses intervenes, and he's like, here, put this bronze serpent up, and when they look at it, they'll be healed. God was always like going, putting this out there, and if you disobey me and do this, things are going to happen. But then Moses would stand in and do this for him. they're just crazy things that were going on. And so then they started to get into, I'm going to skip the donkey that talked. You guys read that, right? That was wild. So, that was wild, that part of the story. God can do anything, right? So then the Israelites were starting to have wrong relations with these people, okay? With the Moabite women, which God was like, no. Okay? Causing them what? To eat the sacrificial meal. Israelites did not do that. So they were causing them. See what happens? See what happens when people say yes to wrong relationships? Crazy. You lose your mind. You lose what's going on. You lose all sense of sense. So this is what's going on here. So you know what it reminded me of when I was reading this? Samson and Delilah. Because he just lost his mind and just was like, in her presence. I'm like, fool, wake up. So same thing going on here. These Israelites were just going all jacked, right? Crazy. So these women were causing all this in their life and to worship other gods. They know better. They know who their God is. Believe me, he's just walked them through so much. So this is all that's going on. all this kind of stuff. Now, this was a wild, I don't know if you guys kind of freaked out about this, but I mean, I had forgotten about this until I read it again. But so Eleazar, who was the priest who took over for Aaron, right? His son Phinehas, he saw an Israelite and a Moabite woman, and he took a spear and he drove that through both of them. Right through her stomach, boom, and through the Israelite. I'm like, that's barbaric. And God said, the curse is gone. All of this that I'm against, the Israelites and what they're doing and all this kind of stuff, he's like, that's all gone. He said, because of Phinehas's honor that he upheld towards me. Can you believe that? I mean, things like that, this kind of stuff was wild. So here it comes to the point where, aren't you glad you don't live in those days? Here it comes to the point where God was telling Moses, okay, so you know what happened. So, Moses knew. He knew he was going to be gathered up with his people and he was going to die. But two things that God let Moses do is he let him see the land. So he restored his eyesight, because Moses died at age 120, and he could see like he was, 15 years old. So God restored his eyesight, and I'm going to read his kind of speech when we're done at the end, because I think it's powerful. But remember when God called Moses, he said, why, I can't do that, because he had like a speech impediment. I don't know if he stuttered or what, but he couldn't speak very well. And he said, much less speaking in front of like millions of people, I can't do that. And so through all this also, when he did make his final speech before he died, it was perfect. So God restored all that. But Moses said, God, I want you to raise up a leader after me to take my place, because these people need a leader. If I'm not going to be here, I need someone to do it. So, of course, that God appointed Joshua as his leader, who's powerful. And we're going to read all about that in chapter 7. I've already gone there because I'm so excited. That's one of my favorite people in the Bible. But so he's the new leader. And I'm going to come back and read some of that to you. But I want to go over a couple of things first, if I can find them, all in my notes here. Let me see where I put them just before we get there. Y'all okay? Okay, let me find this. I wrote it somewhere. Chapter 6, where are you? I just want to give you a couple things about wandering. Oh, all right, Mark, did you take these out of my Bible when it was in the back room? I know you did. You stole them. Okay, I'll find it. I just got to go through a couple things here. Dang. Where are you? It's called writing in the plane and writing on side notes and up on the tops of things. I can't find myself. Oh, where are you? Okay. Oh, okay, here we are. Okay, so what are some things in life that cause us, what lures us away from God? So when we're wandering, when we don't know where we are, when we're not focused, what are some things that lure us away from God? Okay, the first thing, so write this down, and we've just talked about it the whole time, is a complaining spirit. And we have to really be careful of this, because God deals with us today in different ways, but he still deals with us when we have a complaining spirit. Because number one, we're super negative and people don't want to be around us and they don't want to hear us and be a part of us. And we're called to be a mouthpiece for God. So number one, that doesn't represent God. It misrepresents who God is, because God never speaks in negative terms. So I'm always like, why do Christians speak so negatively, or disciples, I like to say. I know we're not perfect people, but we have a choice in how we speak. And I think what we do is we forget who we represent. And we forget really why we're here. And we think we're just here to work 9 to 5. And we forget that we are called first by Christ to be his mouthpiece and to affect the world. Go ye into all the worlds and our nations and our cities, and to affect the world for him. So I think that we really forget that. And we give over to complaining. And we give over to a lot of things. Now, complaining once in a while is once in a while. But I'm talking about chronic. Like these Israelites had. Like chronic complaining. Because someone who is a chronic complainer is an ungrateful person. And I don't ever want to fall into that category. I don't care how hard things get. We don't complain against God. We don't complain against where he has us, because half of, probably 3/4 of where we are, I mean, God knows exactly where we are, but if it's a tough spot or a wandering season spot, because, all of us, we've had wandering seasons in our finances. Have you? Have we? Yes. We have wandering seasons in our relationships. We have wandering seasons in our marriages. We have what's going on? Wandering seasons with this and that and all this kind of stuff. So, and it's the opposite of giving God praise when we complain. So see, we're using up all our time whining. We're using up all our time where we're wasting breath, and we're wasting we're wasting airspace. I always say, like, if I hear like cussing or people talking rude to people, I'm like, that's a waste of my airspace, and I don't want to hear it. Or people fighting, or people always in dissension, or people always bugged with each other. I'm like, okay, that's a lot. I mean, I've just literally sat across from couples that have just been going at it. And I'm like, listen, stop talking. Stop talking, because life and death are in the power of the tongue. And right now, all I can see is hate between the two of you. And the root of hatred is what? Murder. I said, so stop talking. Because right now, the devil's all up in this. And that's his domain. Woo. I always do that. I stand so close. And people are always like, could you please take those shoes off? Could you please stand on the ground? No, I'm wearing my high heels, okay? So yeah. So, and I'm just like, stop talking. I remember one time I was in the midst of, and I can take a lot. I can hear a lot. But I was just listening to this couple, and I was like, oh my gosh, stop talking. Stop saying stuff. Just stop. Because you're totally tearing each other down. And you don't even know the ramifications. And if you could peel back the atmosphere to what your words are doing, they're like nothing but black pitchfork devil words. So I can explain it. Do you know what I mean? The gnarliest things you've ever seen. Just all swirling together and just attacking each other. I said, so the first thing we got to do is stop talking. And then I'm going to make you give me 10 things that you like about this one. And I'm going to make you, because you were naughtier, you're going to give me 20 things. And you better think fast, because I'm giving you about 2 minutes. Because if you've been married to someone for any amount of time, you better have something good to say about them. Because you are the representation of them on the earth. And you should have nothing but bouquets of flowers to say. I'm telling you. The world is selfish. Oh, well, they did this. What caused them to do that? Probably your mouth. Or what caused them to act like that? Probably because you're rude. Or what caused them? Because you're nitpicky. And you're nitpicking on every little pick you can pick on. And you're driving them nuts. You know what I'm saying? Pastor and I say, hey, marriages are 100% give. There ain't no 50-50. 50-50? Are you kidding me? No. It's 100% I give to you, 100% they give to me. That's how it is. That's the only way marriages work, everybody. If you want marriages to work, you give everything. Because I'm telling you, don't be a doormat. I mean, guess what? The other half has to give back. But in my relationship, when I do that or when Pastor does that, we see each other's sacrifice and that it's an honoring thing. It's not like I'm going to take more and I'm going to see what I can give out of you. I shared the funniest story in one of our ladies groups. I said, I'm so, Pastor Chris can spend some money, but I don't. He just always has been like that. I think as he was raised in crazy poverty. I mean, we're crazy, where he had nothing. No Christmas, no presents, no new shoes. I remember when he would play, and he had 3 college offers to basketball and football. He had to borrow his friends' last year's cleats in high school. That's embarrassing when you're in high school. So that's what he had to do. So he gives, and I'm always like, let's keep that in our pockets for a little longer. I mean, I'm not tight with my tithing or my giving. I mean, because it all belongs to God. But I'm like, can we just hold this for a little? He's like, oh, give it. Come on. Let's go get this. And, let's go this, here. And I'm like, I'm like having like hot flashes. What? No, I'm sweating. So why am I saying this? Help me. I had a good point. Dang it. My ladies. Something about my ladies meeting. Thank you. So I was telling them, and I'm laughing because I get this gift for Christmas from Pastor. And I like this really nice expensive shampoo, right? And I won't buy it for myself because it's expensive. But it's those big jugs where seriously, they last like 6 months. I mean, you figure you buy the cheap stuff as opposed to a couple good bottles, it's the same difference. So I'm like, and I won't. I go buy it. Oh, it'd be nice to have you. I'm getting to this much, water in my jug, all that. And he's like, go buy the dang shampoo, babe. And I'm like, no, I have a little bit left. He's like, it's water, okay? So just for funny, just to prove like his point to me, he buys me my nice shampoo for Christmas, But because he knows I won't do it for myself. Why am I telling you this? No, I had a point. What? Oh, yeah, kind of. Okay. I don't know. I just killed my whole story. Okay, so anyway, giving, 100%. I don't know why I was going to that story, but I thought it was funny. But, things like that, like, the little things, that meant huge to me. It just, that just meant a lot to me, and Pastor knows. You know what I mean? So it may sound really dumb and weird to you guys, but those are like, that's my language. Like Pastor, I give, my love language to him is I do. I'm constantly like helping him and assisting him and doing things for him. And he, like Pastor, doesn't have to do anything if he doesn't want to. That's how I can feed the dog, scoop poop, get Liv out of school, make her lunch to school, make lunch, do that by 7:30 in the morning. I'm done. I already ran with my dog, did my exercise, did my praying, did all that. And it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, so now what are we going to do? He's like, you wear me out. Okay. So it's like all that stuff, house is clean. I'm just like that. He goes, you need to let Danny and Liv do something. I'm like, no, because I can get it done 20 times faster and I don't have to bicker with them. He's like, yeah, but hon, I'm still cooking for Danny. So funny. And Livy goes, Mom, I like it when Dad's here, but I really like it when you're here because you do everything for me. And Dad makes me make my own lunch, Mom. And Dad makes me go get my, all my volleyball stuff myself, Mom, and you pack it for me and you do all this for me. And I'm like, oh, because she's my last baby. She's 16 and I'm sad. Anyway, so it's just all about giving, all about loving, all about that kind of stuff, okay? So, not sure why I went there, but we're going to bring it all back. Wandering. I just wandered somewhere. Off somewhere, oh my gosh, into my shampoo zone. Oh, okay. So they were into, so the first thing is complaining spirit, being ungrateful, opposite of giving God praise, using your time for doing that. Forget that we have been blessed with things and always wanting more. Remember our lower story, never being content, okay? Here's number 2. I'm just going to give you 14 of them, so we're on number 2. No, I'm just kidding. Here's number 2. So we talked a little bit about willful immorality and idolatry. We see that with when they were engaging in wrong relationships. It cost them. It was crazy. God was like angering and building up his anger. It caused them to move off of their culture, their very born genetic culture that they had within them. They were moving off of that and away from who God was. And that gets into crazy territory. And it's offensive, when we use our bodies outside of marriage. We're not supposed to engage in that kind of stuff, because what God does is how he set it up is our bodies are temples for God. And he knows exactly when we are supposed to be with someone, because he knows all of the heart deals and all of the attachment issues. That's why, youth and teens that are pregnant these days, it's so sad. And it's just, I always tell Liv, like, she just showed me the other day, I was picking her up from school and she goes, Mom, you see that girl walking with her boyfriend right there? And she's like 16 as she's in Liv's class. I go, yeah. She said she's pregnant. And I just went, oh, okay. I said, well, a baby is always amazing, Liv, but you can have a baby at the wrong time. I said, that's kind of a bummer, that she did that. So anyway, all these things where it's like, and this is what, I teach my girls. It's like anything outside of, marriage is the wrong timing, because it has so many ramifications that it has with it. And God